Hey guys, wanted to go ahead and just do a first impressions video of the Truthear Hexa Pure and to go from there. Yeah, just wanted to go ahead and give you my quick review of it and to go from there. Now, before I go on further, I was not given a free unit. I'm not sponsored by this company. I bought it with my own money. I was just curious because when I was looking at the reviewers, I noticed that there was a lot of mixed reviews. But I saw a pattern. People who liked the original Hexa, they didn't like this as much. They would complain about something. But then people who hated the original Hexa, they like this. And I'm in the camp of the people who actually didn't like the original Hexa. I made a review of the Truthear Hexa, which recently came out, and obviously this is the Sennheiser IE200. Okay, really quickly, let's talk about bass. In terms of bass, this has more bass than this, and this. This has least bass compared to this, and this has, but basically, here's my quick, 2-minute summary. 30-second summary of it. The original Truth Hexa had less bass compared to the Blessing 2. It had less bass compared to the Anemic ER2XR, and it had less bass compared to the IE200. So it just had less bass, and people were saying, maybe you didn't put the seal in correctly. No, I definitely did. I tried. I checked over and over, but I can tell you 100% it doesn't have as much bass as this, or this. It didn't have enough bass, and that's why I ultimately returned it. So what I do want to say is they definitely fixed that. So the Truthear Hexa Pure is basically, it has now. This has now a little bit more bass compared to the ER2XR. It has a little bit more bass compared to the Blessing 2, and has a little bit more bass compared to the IE200. But it's not overwhelming bass, right? So it just has a little bit more. The other thing I want to say, and I think this is important, well, two things I want to say that's important. The first thing I want to say is, one of the reviewers mentioned that what they did was, of the different earplugs, they chose the smallest ones and found that they got the best results with the smallest ones. And that's what I did. And that's important to note because it's kind of a B putting these things on. It took a little bit of effort to put it on there. And had he not said that, I would have probably just chosen one of these other ones that were easier. But I'm actually thankful that he mentioned that the smaller ones sounded the best because they do sound a lot better. The second thing I want to say is, which I think is important for maybe most people here, they want to know, does it negatively affect female vocals? Does it negatively affect the air? Does it negatively affect the treble? And I can happily tell you that it doesn't. It doesn't. So although, yes, it is a little, I would say the Blessing 2 are a little bit brighter. I would say the IE200 are a little bit brighter. I would say the ER2XR are a smidge brighter, but it doesn't sound muffled, or it doesn't sound, I would say, like there's a mask over the female vocals. It still has clarity. It's just that it just has a little bit more weight, a little bit more fullness to the voice. But what made me happy was when I was listening to all these pop songs, the female vocals still have air, still have sparkle, and that's what makes me happy. And I made a little silly diagram. Now, I actually made two reviews. I made a review of the Truth Hexa, which I returned back to Amazon Returns, and then I made a review of the Truth Critical Zero Red, and I bashed on that because I didn't like it. And I'm going to tell you why I didn't like both of them, and they're both for opposite reasons. And those two reasons are actually in many ways resolved with this. So the problem with the Hexa was there wasn't enough bass. It was anemic. It's where's the meat, right? But the problem with the Truth Critical Zero Red is it had the opposite problem. It had the bass, right? But what it did was it made it so the female vocals sounded like there was a mask over their mouth. It sounded like they were going through a de-esser 20 times. It sounded like, it just lost clarity. There's no sparkle. And a lot of people say that. There's no sparkle. And that's why I returned and it's hard to balance the two. And I was actually pretty surprised to see that this the Truthear Pure was able to balance the two. In other words, it has a good amount of bass, far better than the original Hexa. But this has clarity, this has air, this has sparkle, but it's not overwhelmingly enough sparkle. So it's just it's better than the Truth Critical Zero Red on the sparkle side. I'm using bad words, or I mean, I'm not using good technical words, but hopefully you can follow what I'm saying. But then it also has more bass and better bass compared to the Hexa, which it's right in that fine line, that Goldilocks right there. And I just think it's just great. There's only one thing for me, which is kind of like where it's putting me on the fence, but it's actually not for most people. But the problem with the Truthear Hexa is when you look at it, it's kind of like a squarish or rectangular kind of shape to it, right? And the problem is that actually kind of cuts into my ear for some reason. My ear, not your ear. And but it's not to the point where it's a deal breaker, but it's just kind of like, I'm just like, damn. It's just that these other headphones I have are, a little bit more comfortable. But overall, I'm really impressed with the sound of these. I couldn't say I couldn't say that these are better than the ER2XR or better than the Blessing 2 or better than the IE200. I would just say, in the most simplest way I can say this, it just sounds really good. And it's just, if I was going to summarize this in 2 sentences, if you hated the Hexa, you're going to love these. And if you like the Hexa, you might not like these. But I hated the Hexa. I thought it didn't have enough bass, and this has it. And I felt the Critical Zero Red just lost a lot of shimmer. It didn't have enough like sparkle in female vocals, and this has it. So it has the best of both worlds. So overall, I'm really impressed with these, and I likely will be keeping these. So yeah, that's all I want to say. You guys have a great one. Okay, bye.